So this last section is designed to allow you in the audience to engage in a little Q&A discussion with our panel. I want you to know we had to make an adjustment. As you could tell earlier when we were taking questions, it was just a little too difficult to hear on stage so that we could actually respond back appropriately. So we've moved the microphone to the front here. And anybody who'd like to ask a question, I'm sure we can get to maybe a half a dozen or so. You might want to come and hang by this microphone. There's a few chairs as well. So please consider joining us there. While you're doing that, I want to introduce and welcome our panel. And first, really fortunate to have Chuck Wieger join us, who is the chair of the Education Finance Committee in the Minnesota Senate. Thank you for joining us, Senator Wieger. Also, Melissa Franzen is here, a longtime friend of many of the issues we work on, and Melissa serves on the Health and Human Services Finance Committee, amongst others, in the Senate. We're also joined by Jennifer Loon, the chair of the Education Finance Committee in the House of Representatives. And then on my far right at the end of the stage, we are joined by Matt Dean, who is on the Health and Human Services Finance Committee in the House of Representatives. Please welcome. So this is a conversation about children and youth, and we just finished an amazing dialogue on race and equity in education. So I'm going to let our two chairs of the education committees kind of warm us up a little bit. And I'll start with Representative Jennifer Loon, if that's all right, or if Senator Wieger would like to go. And just kind of make a little transition for us. What were some of the things that you heard and you're thinking about as you enter session?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. Thanks for having us here. Excited to be before this tremendous group of educators and people who care so deeply about our children and making sure that all children in Minnesota have the ability to be healthy and thrive and educated to their greatest potential. I think that's a goal that we all share. I'm really privileged to be chairing the Education Finance Committee in the House this session. And just a couple of highlights of things that we're working on and reflecting a little bit on the last panel. You know, Minnesota does a lot of things well, and I think we have a lot of things to be proud of, but we have fallen far short, and I've used the word disgraceful in talking about our achievement gap for children of color in Minnesota. And that is something that I am very focused on, our committee's focused on, I know the Senate is as well, and how we dig in and figure out how we improve that, how we close that gap, how we make sure that no matter who you are in Minnesota, that you are getting a great education that prepares you for career and college success, whatever your dreams and aspirations are. We put a great emphasis on early childhood education to try to help get disadvantaged kids into quality programs to help with that. And that's something that we made a tremendous step forward for. We more than doubled our commitment to early learning scholarships. It's over $100 million for the current biennium. And I think that's a great testament to the really robust commitment to that bipartisanly amongst legislators and the governor. That's a great thing. We also increased by 130% our funding for school readiness. Again, these are really preschool programs in our schools targeted at at-risk year-olds. And another $10 million to support Head Start. So I think we did some great things to help push that forward. But, you know, we can't talk about this and only focus on early childhood. And this is something that I have conversations with school districts and others is that, you know, we've got a lot of currently in school, somewhere in the K-12 system, that are not succeeding, that are not being given the right opportunity, the right tools to succeed, and we've got a lot of work to do on that. So I look forward, I know there'll be questions about that, but I just wanted to open up and talk about our commitment to early childhood, but that we're not there yet, and we've got a lot of work to do from there up through our K-12 system to make sure that we're giving kids the roots and the wings that they need to be successful.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, first of all, for, I guess you, okay. Frank, we're okay. I appreciate your stepping up in your profession, stepping up for the young people, stepping up for the future of our state. It makes a difference. You're special. Early education, child care is a high priority for myself and for our colleagues. It's a bipartisan issue that we share. And we have walked that talk in the previous legislative session where we invested a record amount of new dollars for scholarships, for ECFE, early childhood family education, for school readiness, additional funding, and other programs as well. And so I'm very proud of that. And I also want to note that our committee, it's E12, starting with early ed. We bridge that entire area, linking with the traditional K-12, because the number one indicator of whether a student is likely to graduate, be college or career ready, is how well you've done, and parents, in preparing that student to be ready for K. It's the highest return on investment, and that's why we're putting our money where our mouth is. And we'll continue. Thank you. Looking ahead, we've heard a number of proposals, ideas, whether it's going to be to reform CCAP, if it's going to look at the importance of home health visits by nurses, others in that team, so important in working with parents, parent education programs, leave that's available, that important bonding that starts early on, additional funds for scholarships, early learning opportunities. There's a number of areas that are proven. There isn't one single item, and so my key would be message is work together, because together we will accomplish more. And I look forward to discussing some of these issues in more detail. We are all in agreement on the importance of early ed. We just need to figure out what is going to be the best strategy in terms of government's role, but it is high priority, and look forward to making additional progress in the upcoming session.
Great. Thank you very much. I think we'll just move right to, we'll go to Representative Dean, and then we'll move to Senator Franson.
Thank you, and thank you all for the great work that you're doing all across the state of Minnesota. Those folks here in St. Paul and those of you who are watching from home, we really do appreciate all of the hard work that you're doing on the front lines. And I was going to share some words with you today, but I just happened to have, as chance would have it, a scheduled visit of an early learning center this morning at 9 o'clock a.m. So that's where I was in White Bear Lake. And I visited the center. It's about 110 kids, about 33% on CCAP, with also with scholarships on top of that, and had a great tour. But there was a woman named Jeanette who's been teaching school for 26 years. And she's been teaching preschool, the same age group, for 26 years. And I said that I was on my way downtown to talk to you folks. Is there anything that she would like to share with you all? And as you can imagine, she really took the opportunity, and she thought about, kind of grabbed me on the way out, and she said, she talked about the changes that she's seen over the last quarter century teaching kids, and she's now teaching the kids of the kids that she started with. And she says, you know, there's two things that she's seen in that time that's really changed. Number one, she said, I used to babysit and now I teach kindergarten. That's the number one thing. She said these kids are learning, they're learning academics, they're learning concepts, they're learning writing. That's a change that's happened. And the second thing is the kids are learning more faster to get where they need to get, and it's easy to get behind. And the kids that used to be behind and need a little bit of help catching up, are now getting left behind. So in her 25 years, she saw kids from getting a little behind to children being left behind. And she said that's the biggest, starkest thing. And it's about what's going on at home combined with how fast things are changing with education, with early education. And that, I think, is the crux. Chairing Human Services Finance Committee, we oversee the CCAP dollars that go into early ed. And we also see a lot of the other things that we have, the social determinants. We see what's going on at home. So where those two things come together, that's the collision right now. We see that with family fragmentation. You see it with mental health issues that you're going to be seeing transfer across. That's a big, big deal. And all that leads to the difference between kids being a little bit behind and kids being left behind. So that's our charge. That's the work ahead. I look forward to it. Been working with Representative Loon for many years in the House. You have no greater champion than Representative Loon in the House on this issue. She has just been a true champion for education and particularly for early education her entire so we're all very fortunate to have her in the House. Also Senator Uyghur in the Senate, equally strong on this issue. So you've got great people in the legislature, and we look forward to the work ahead.
Thank you very much. Senator Franzen.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and it's exciting to see all the different partners and your agenda today. You've had a very packed agenda of great thought leaders in this issue. I am a newer legislator in this panel. I'm serving my first term in the Senate, and I represent Senate District 49, which includes Edina, West Bloomington, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka. And I was actually this morning visiting with our Edina Public Schools superintendent and his staff, and just yesterday I also had a chance to go to a early childhood care center in the district, and to see the perspectives of both folks that are working like you at the ground level, teaching our kids and getting them for life and career. So it's very humbling to see the work that's put in front of us. And I did see that when I went to the child care center. They are being taught curriculum. It's not just watching over your children. It's really teaching our children. And I have a new perspective as a new mother of a 7-month-old. I'm looking at it with a new lens, not to say that I wasn't already passionate about this topic. I know some people in the audience know that I've been working on early childhood even before the legislature, supporting organizations like Joyce Preschool, who I know is in the audience. I'm a big advocate of the bilingual immersion and program that they have, but certainly targeting communities of color and knowing that that is a huge gap in our state. I had a town hall meeting just yesterday in Bloomington, and one question from the audience, from the constituents, was why do we have this big disparity between Latinos and Blacks and other communities of color and Caucasian students in Minnesota? And I'm no expert, but I started answering the question. Basically, we are having a big demographic shift, not just in Minnesota, but across our nation. We've had immigrants in Minnesota forever. Our country is based on immigrants, so that's not an excuse to say that we can't do better for our kids of color. And when I started in the legislature, I remember early on being a strong advocate of the early childhood scholarships and the Mini Minds campaign, and I think that is the best approach we have today to really target our most at-risk families and kids. But I also see it from my perspective on the Health and Human Services Committee, and being vice chair of that committee, the overlap between jurisdictions and pockets of dollars, that sometimes we work in silos when we should really be working stronger together. And I'm on a mission to make that happen. And I know that we have CCAP dollars that should be aligned well with scholarships, or maybe we should explore how they could be more effectively implemented. It's no longer about watching over your kids. It's about making sure our kids learn at every intervention with any of you practitioners in the field. So we need to do it from a state level, really targeting those dollars where they have the biggest return on investment. And we know from research that that is early childhood education. However, we also have kids in middle school and high school and across the pipeline all the way to higher ed we're also lacking we have some gaps there as well, in skills gaps, and we can't forget those kids. We're going to have a huge workers gap in the next coming years, and we know it's coming. The data's there. State demographer has told us again and again. So if we do nothing, it's at our own peril, because we know it's there, and we need to make sure that all kids and all young adults are ready for career. So my first 2 years in the Senate, I was on the Education Policy Committee, which gave me a great perspective on E12, and now I'm serving on the Higher Ed Committee and Workforce Development Committee, and seeing that we can no longer afford to work in silos, and we have to marry the two. We see school districts doing that, and we as a state need to allow for the flexibility and for the innovation at your level, and not just dictate what you do. But again, I feel strongly about where we came from. Just in 2013, we had $3 to $5 million. It was a pilot to do the early learning scholarships. Was a pilot just a few years ago, and today, as Representative Loon has mentioned, we have over $100 million for early childhood scholarships, and it's great celebration, but that's only 11% of the need. So we have a long ways to go. I'm not saying dollars is going to do it. We need to streamline the process to get families the scholarships they need. We made some progress changing and enhancing lifting the cap from $5,000 per family to $7,500, because we know it's an expensive endeavor. We're one of the highest states in the country with child care expenses, given the income of families, and we want families to be able to opt for quality programming. So we don't want to say $5,000, go find whatever you can. We want them to have the incentive to find the best quality care. And Parent Aware, I know it's in the House, so I want to shout out for that. That's another benchmark that we have to be able to be accountable for the dollars that we're spending at the state level. So we can't afford to just send dollars out there without some return, and we know quality is a big part of that. So again, I want to commend everyone who is in this field, because I can't do what you do. I can only help you do what you do with the resources we have at the state level and advocate for you. And I will certainly, from the Health and Human Services Committee, I would speak, I don't want to speak for Senator Lori, who's the chair, but certainly you have my commitment to work on how to better and more efficiently be able to marry the work that's happening in HHS with the work that's happening in Department of Education, because we can't afford to just say, you guys teach and we take care. No, we need to work holistically and also work with families. Lastly, I'll mention a big shout out for Targeted Home Visiting is another great program that we have in our state that we know has a return on investment, because it's not just about when they get to school, the kids get to school, but when they get home. You know, they're going through different experiences, and we need to make sure that we're able to have the tools and resources and to be able to really help families be as effective as they can and for their children, and to also be there for their learning, and it's we're in it together, and we have to make sure again that we don't spread the little resources we have too widely. We need to target, and my commitment there is that unless we find a better way, I think scholarships and being able to really target families who need it the most, and especially in communities of color, we need to do a better job at that, and we still have a long ways to go.
Thank you. Yeah, give her a hand. So the legislative session starts soon. It's not a budget year, but there's still some opportunities to advance both policy and perhaps some spending. I don't want to get too far ahead on spending, but some policy and some spending that could advance our state's efforts, equity in education or equity in health and human services work. Just what's one thing that you might be optimistic about, or that you personally might be helping carry a little bit this session? And I'll start with Senator Uyghur.
Yes, we're looking forward to what that budget forecast is, and we assume there's going to be $1 billion or more in play. Yes, potholes are important, but what could be more important than the young kids in this?
Let's get it going.
I have a lot of areas that I'd like to see. There isn't one particular silver bullet, but as it relates to early education, I just want to mention a couple, but my name is on probably 5 or 6 proposals.
I was pushing for one, but
But we want to close the achievement gap, but I often hear eliminate the achievement gap 0 to 3. And that would be a high tier priority in terms of the home health visits, the parents. I think that's that early start, getting prepared, and then if help's needed, making sure the right help is there so that people will be on a successful journey. I think it's unconscionable that we have people on a waiting list for child care. That would be a very high priority as well.
thank you. Representative Loon, what's that one big thing that session you might be able to move forward with a little bit?
You know, you ask a hard question when you tell legislators to choose one thing. That's really hard. Well, Chuck mentioned a lot of great things, and I'll just say, and you probably have heard this from earlier panels about not knowing exactly how this is going to take shape. I mean, we're waiting for an upcoming forecast on how the budget looks. You know, we've seen in November that there is a surplus. Is that going to grow? And what's going to be available to us? So, and then with that, it's not really a budgeting year. So with a couple of big things left on the table for last session, transportation bill and taxes, you know, will there be some of that surplus distributed to committees and what we call targets? Certainly our committee has a list of priorities if we do get the signal that we have more money, and early childhood is at the top of the list. But I'm hoping, because I think a tax package is something that's going to be worked on. There's a provision in the House tax bill, and that's again sitting in conference committee between the House and Senate, that I feel strongly about, that I offered, and that is increasing our dependent care tax credit. You know, we do a lot, or we've talked about scholarships for really very poor families. But there's a lot of lower to middle income families that also struggle very much with the cost of childcare. And so I think we can take a multi-pronged approach by trying to beef up and increase our dependent care tax credit to help quality childcare be more affordable for all Minnesota families. So I'm really hoping that's one thing that survives a tax package and that we get that signed into law, because I think that will go a long way toward augmenting our scholarship program as well.
Good, thank you. So we have one question. I think must be one extrovert in the audience who has made their way to the microphone, and we'll take that question and then we'll close up from there, I think.
Hi, my name is Iolanda Evans. I'm an early childhood navigator with Northside Achievement Zone. I am very much an introvert, and I'm actually pretty nervous right now, but I felt like I have to say something.
Thank you. You're looking brave, so thanks for joining us.
You. So we've been talking about this whole kindergarten readiness piece and the importance of making sure that our children are showing up to school ready. And there's been this overarching theme around early child care not being affordable. My children have the benefit, or maybe the privilege, of being able to come from a 2-parent family. And we struggle. We were paying about $1,400 a month for our then 1-year-old and 3-year-old to have a quality early learning setting so that we could work. And which is more than our mortgage payment and more than a whole lot of other stuff, and was probably about 1/3 of our income, I think, that we were paying toward early learning. And so we see that it's not affordable. Quality early learning is not affordable. I work with providers, and I also work with parents. And there is this overarching thing that if you want to provide quality, that you have to raise your tuition. If you want teachers who are quality teachers, who are college-educated teachers, then you have to pay them a certain salary so that they can sustain their own families. And so I just would like for us to start to look at finding ways to actually reduce the tuition, reduce the price of early learning, from the center's perspective, instead of constantly trying to figure out how we can put more money in the families' pockets to cover it, if we could look at this thing from the very top, like why does early learning actually cost so much, and how we can support centers to reduce their tuition cost. If we could do both of those things at the same time, so scholarships, in addition to looking at why centers have to have such high tuitions in order to make ends meet, I think that that's extremely important. The other thing that I want to talk about really quick is infant and toddler care. It's like totally missing from the picture. And if 80% of our babies' brains are developed by the age of 3 and quality scholarships are not available for the infants and toddlers unless they have a preschool-age sibling, then we're missing a huge piece of the picture. So it's not just about providing care so that parents could work, but it really is about the brain development, kindergarten readiness. We know it starts in the womb, and so we want to be able to do that. And let me see, all right, I got a little notes here. And so I always like to look around the room just to see who is sitting at the table. And when we look and we see who's sitting at the table, it doesn't necessarily reflect the population of children that we're talking about in terms of representation. But we know that a huge number of direct care workers, a huge number of teachers' assistants, a huge number of behavioral specialists are people of color, and we have to figure out how to get them in higher leadership positions so that they are the ones who are part of making some of the decisions that affect the children who look like them. Thank you.
So to my panel, you missed the fact that I opened earlier with my role as MC is to kind of move us to right along on the agenda. So what I'll say is thank you for that great question or set of questions. I would invite each of you to make a couple of reactions to that, and so all 4 of you, and then we'll wrap with that as some of your final comments. Okay.
I'll try to be succinct, but you hit on great aspects, and one thing that I certainly we all agree on early childhood education is where we need to start. But the tax credit that Representative Loon just talked about, I'm carrying a version of that tax credit in the Senate, and the way I modeled it after Louisiana, which not only tackles the cost of child care, but also tackles a business tax credit for those businesses who want to also provide care for employees, to give them an incentive to do so. It also tackles the education piece from the provider and from the teacher perspective. So you would also get a tax credit to get into these fields and be able to afford to be a teacher in these much critical fields that we want you to stay in. So I put a shout out there for that bill because the governor has a similar bill. It sounds like Representative Loon has a bill on that. And I'm a Democrat. I'm talking tax credit. Yes, it makes sense, and we need to be able to have an incentive for all of us to continue to look for those quality programs. And because we're one of the highest, third or fourth in the country of costs for families, given their income, we can't afford to. We need to find ways to continue to have families be able to continue to work and not have to opt whether they're going to work or they're going to take care of their child or they're going to choose a center that might not be the best meet the needs of the child because of cost. So again, the tax credit I think will help families be able to afford quality. It'll help just promoting early childhood education as a whole, but it also will promote people to come into the field and businesses also to be able to attract action for employees to have a flexible arrangement and opportunities for employees to be able to afford to have their kids in quality care.
Here, go ahead.
Well, I just, the woman who asked the question, the introvert, I was wondering if you had any extrovert siblings at home, because I'd like to see that. You're very, very good questions. We really appreciate that. And appreciate the comment, and I think it is important when you look at early childhood costs of over $1,000 per child per month for families, particularly for single moms, to deal with that. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that crushing cost without some help? I have a constituent who's a single mom and also trying to get back to school. And the Pathways Scholarship for her was the difference between going to Century College to get a nursing degree, to get a job where she can afford to provide for her family, and struggling to fall a little bit further behind every year. That was a little difference that made a big difference in her life. That is a huge payoff, downstream payoff in terms of the economic viability of the state and the economic productivity of our workforce. So when you're providing assistance to kids, you're not just providing that assistance to kids, you might be providing that assistance to a mom or a dad who's able to then go back to school and be able to provide more for their family. So these are such important things in the lives of kids and families, and I really appreciate the question, and I think that the need is there, particularly in the infant and toddler areas, as you said, where the costs are actually higher and the payoff is bigger.
Just real quickly, I'll mention that the House has recognized that the affordability and access to quality child care is a big problem or a concern around the state. In fact, we just formed a new subcommittee on that topic, and they are traveling the state, holding really almost open forums or informational hearings. We've lost a lot of providers, especially in rural areas of our state. That is a concern, that finding even a child care provider for someone who's maybe got a job, but they don't have a place to have their child be cared for, well, it is a problem. And so I'm hoping that subcommittee is going to bring forward some suggestions to the legislature. We've talked a lot about funding and tax credits, and all that's really important. The one thing I'll also throw into the mix is talking with our child care providers, and we'd love to hear from all of you. We want to make sure that you're offering quality, running quality programs, which I'm sure you are, but are there regulations or things that just kind of adds to your cost of doing business that is not adding to the quality of what the children are receiving? If there are things we can do to cut down on that, maybe that helps also reduce costs of childcare. So these are large, encompassing topics, and I want to make sure that we're looking at all angles of that because, there's no more expensive time in your life as a parent other than when they go to college. But those first few years, 5 years until they're in school, it is incredibly expensive. And I've been a worker when my kids were little, and it is really a hard nut to crack for a lot of families.
Child care, early education, they're very important. Obviously, everyone should have a right to maximize their opportunity, but we need to fund it. We need to continue on that road. I believe there's some opportunities we can look at in the short term. Earlier, there was talk about the funding streams, and they sure do cross. We're going to have a joint hearing with Health and Human Service and the Education Committee a week from, or on Tuesday, actually next Tuesday, to talk about this. There's different silos out there, but I think maybe there's some more efficient ways. I invite anyone that would like to be a part of that conversation to do that. On money, and I have enjoyed so much the panel presentations, and on equity, talking about the workforce, people of color. The Education Committee will be having a hearing on March 10th during the first week of session about the worker shortage for teachers, and that includes early ed. You should not have to take a poverty vow to do that line of work if we want to maintain and recruit the people. We've already referred to the great amount of brain development that happens early on, and we need highly qualified teachers to assist in that. We need pathways for paras that can achieve that. So we'll be having discussions on that. Pathways, particularly for people of color, to be in these programs, and it'll all be a part of the mix as we approach these challenges. Thank you.
Well, my thanks to the panel. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and your reflections. More importantly, on behalf of everyone here, thank you for your leadership and your service through the legislature. And we'll just have you stay here. Sarah Caruso, President and CEO of United Way, just has a few closing comments, and then we'll be all done for the day. So thank you very much.
I want to send you on your way with 3 thoughts. First, stand out here and point to start early. And I want to remind all of you how much collectively, we have all achieved in the past 5 or 6 years.